anybody who has your child protection and safety training, we need another nursery worker. There are 3 kiddos in the nursery, and we got 1 lady in there. So that would be somebody who'd be willing to slide in there tonight. We would appreciate that.
A female person, correct?
A female person, yes. And a bunch of ladies get up to go. So that's exactly what I wanted to have happen. Because I don't coordinate that schedule, and I don't know who's supposed to be there, but anyway. Again, pray for Rachel and Henry. They leave tonight at midnight for South Korea. They will be there for a little over 2 weeks, I think it is, it's a missions trip from the movie. So they're going, and her doctor's got her on, made her wear compression socks. She's fussing a little bit because of the plane traveling and everything, being pregnant. So be in prayer for them. And I don't have any updates on Gary. Gary's daughter is actually out of town, and she's feeding me information from out of town. She's away on a trip, and is not able to get back. So I had a couple people asking what the room number is, and I can't even find that out for you yet. I will try to call and see if I can get somebody to give me, with the HIPAA stuff. Used to, pastors could call up the hospital and say, hey, this is so-and-so from church, and they'd give us a room number. Right now, it all depends on who's sitting at the desk, whether or not they want to give me a room number or not. All I know is that he is in the rehab area of UPMC East. And so as soon as I have that information, I'll get it out so that some of you might stop over and say hi to him. I know he would appreciate that as well. Anything else I'm supposed to say? All right, here we go. You may look at it for 1 minute. I'm not even going to let you say it. No, I'm going to make it 30 seconds. You can look at it for 30 seconds. Review it. All right, here we go. Ready? For since the creation of the world, his eternal and divine nature have been clearly seen through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. Romans 1:20. Go back up here. It says, since the creation of the world is invisible attributes. There's always the one that catches. It's those 3, invisible attributes, eternal power, and divine nature. It's getting those 3 in order. IED. Tim says it's an IED experience. So invisible attributes, eternal power, divine nature. IED. Sometimes those things help you remember things. So not bad, not bad. I'm going to skip over all of this. We talked about chapter 8, all the different resting moments within the Ark experience. And then we began in this area. We are up to about verse 5, 5, and 6, basically. So Genesis chapter 9. We kind of left off talking about capital punishment and animal, what happens if an animal's involved. But let's drop in there and pick back up. Surely I will require your lifeblood. From every beast I will require, and from every man's brother I will require the life of a man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man's blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. As for you, be fruitful and multiply, populate the earth, and abundantly multiply in it. So again, I'm just going to cap this off. We kind of talked about this pretty significantly. I don't know if anybody has any more comments that you want to make. We can. The issue regarding capital punishment is how do I want to say this the right way? It is an image of God issue. taking a life, whether an animal takes the life of someone or a human takes the life of someone, it is an issue of being created in the image of God. That's why murder is wrong. One of the problems that an atheist has is by what standard or by whose rule decides that something's wrong. Without God, without an absolute standard, who says I can't just kill Tim because I want to? They will argue, well, society says so. Society says it's wrong. Well, why does society say it's wrong? There are other societies that say it's not wrong. Go to some dark places in our world where tribal warfare is no big deal. Of course, that might fit under the just war principle. That's a whole other issue. But I mean, for the most part, taking a life individually outside of war is wrong. Why? Who gets to set that standard?
I'd argue that your conscience is telling you that.
And I would ask, where do you get that conscience?
Right, yeah.
Why does your human conscience say you shouldn't do this?
Well, a Christian would know that God gave it.
It's a biblical issue.
Right.
And it's one of those issues that I don't mind discussing with an atheist, is the issue of morality as an atheist. As an atheist, what makes something moral, immoral, or immoral? What's the standard of that? How do you decide? Because it's kind of an every man did that which is right in his own eyes. Now I can't tell them that because I'm quoting scripture. They'll have no use for that now.
I've talked to a few atheists before, like in school and stuff, and I think what they would argue is that, like, the reason why murder is wrong is because it does not, like, work with the end goal is the furtherance of humanity. Like, at the same time, like, how can you argue that this person needs to die for the furtherance of humanity?
Yeah, Tim needs to die because I want humanity to be better.
That's arguable.
Tim gets picked on because he sits right there. And I'm not going to pick on the young guys because I'm glad they're here. I'm glad you're here too, Tim, not Joel. Mara.
As far as conscience, like he was saying, we were made in the image of God, so where along the line does that conscience leave us? Wouldn't we have that at first because of...
I think every man has a conscience within them because of being created in the image of God. Now, you could silence that. You could betray that conscience, which is why people do bad things. They betray what is, quote unquote, innate within them because they were created in the image of God. It's just not a good thing to kill people. Well, why not? Because everybody was created in the image of God. How do I know that? Well, whether you realize it or not, it's because God put his stamp on you. His fingerprints are all over you. And you can say that there's no God, but the reality is because you understand that some things are wrong and some things are right, proves that there is a God because there's an imprint. Bob.
Doesn't Paul talk about having their consciences seared?
Yeah, that happens as you, and it's just like with anything. And we suffer this as believers who believe in God. We tell God, no, that's not that bad, and we just gradually, you lose a sensitivity to certain things. Now, you may be doing great in 9 out of 10 things, but you've got that one thing that you've seared your conscience against. That doesn't change that God says that it's wrong. It just changes how you feel about it.
I gotta agree with Matt. I mean, in talking with atheists, that they would say, yeah, it's like what's best for society. But then it's like, well, whose society? Or, if it's, then you get back to the survival of the fittest. I want my family to prosper, not necessarily the kitchen family.
Right.
Because I'm in competition with them for goods and all this. You see what I mean? So, but if you're close enough, then maybe we can form an alliance of some sort.
We can wipe somebody else out. Because we don't need them.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thinking that brought about the Holocaust.
Yep.
Brought about the killing fields.
Yep.
It's like, you're different than me, or you must die so I may survive.
Yeah, there is something, somebody decides that somebody else is a less than. The abortion issue. That this is an inconvenience. That baby is a less than. That baby is, I watch too many clips and reels and things. That baby's a parasite. Who gets to decide that a baby's a parasite? That's what they're calling it. I've heard young women, college age, a little bit older, that's what they're referring to. That fetus, which basically means baby anyway in Latin. We won't even get on that issue. Every time they say fetus, yeah, of course it's a baby. Because that's all that word means. Little human, if you want to be literal, I guess. But
They don't want to use the word baby.
no, but fetus sounds better, but it means the same thing.
Just to soothe their own conscience.
Yeah,
Inside them, they know that this is wrong. Just as anybody that commits murder, inside, they know it's wrong. Because if they wouldn't evade the repercussions of what they've done.
true.
If they didn't have that inside, that's God's place,
Yeah,
you know.
I would agree with you. I think there probably are people that we would categorize as maybe heinous serial killers whose consciences are so seared, whose consciences are so off the rockers, if you will, that just don't see anything what they're doing is wrong. It's just, I've read a few studies where they actually derive enjoyment in taking the life of another, which plays back into paganism and demonic things, where
Yes.
taking of another, you're drawing their life force, their life blood from them so that you get something out of it. Of course, mental health issues might play into that too. We've got to be, allow a category for that. That's an illness. I don't think that everybody commits murder is mentally ill. I just think some of them are just flat out evil. And that's because that's what happens. When you take God out of the picture, anything's possible.
I suppose they're going back to having, God's stamp on you, and you've got all these people who want to rename something. It just shows that they know there's something wrong here, but if I can call it something else, I can try to make it sound right to fit into
Exactly.
so that I'm okay with it.
Exactly. We can recategorize it, call it something different, make it sound better. And we talked about this last week. Somebody brought it up. I don't remember who brought it up, but it is important to note that it is the responsibility of humanity to manage this. God has put it within the authority of humankind to be the one that executes this. If I kill Tim, it is the responsibilities of other human beings to hold me accountable and my life. That's the responsibility. This is interesting because Paul talks a lot about government, but we don't have a lot of governmental instructions in the Old Testament outside of what was laid out for Israel. But there is a government structure that seems to be somehow innate, even in the creation mandate. As you look how there were cities and things that had developed, there had to be something there, a structure in place that managed. How did, even the Canaanites, as in Cain's family, the Canaanites, actually, I think is what that distinction is, the Canaanites, how did they manage all the industry and buildings and these cities? Somebody had to manage all of that. I guess communal living can work. I mean, it works for sure. But even like in places like the Bruderhof, there's still a governing authority of elders who tell people what to do. So I think that's also something important to kind of think about. Even though this doesn't specifically lay out a government structure, still by saying that it is man's responsibility to take care of this. It is humanity's responsibility.
What's scary is when the government starts getting, years ago, you could rely on the government, so to speak. But now it's like, look at the last government president, allowing things to happen and go on without even, what we would never have done years ago.
Yeah.
Allowing it. So when you have a government that starts turning away from God and
The only kind of government that truly works is a theocracy. You know, I'm not against democracy, I'm not against having a democratic republic, but the only kind of government that ultimately works is a theocracy where God's calling the shots. Yeah.
And that does not mean it's people who say that they talk for God. God
Yes,
really-
yes, it would be a literal experience, which is what we'll see during the millennial kingdom.
Yeah.
We will see a renewed theocracy, or perhaps for the first time, see a literal on earth theocracy during the millennial kingdom.
And wouldn't there still be, during that millennial, even under that,
Yep.
there are people that fall away.
Yep.
They're gonna fall.
That is probably, Ken, that is one of the things about the millennium that probably plagues me and makes me think more than anything, here's Jesus himself, physically. I can go up and see him. I can see the scars. I can talk to him. There he sits. And there's a vast majority of believers who are redeemed, who are also present and in a perfected state at that point. And yet, there are millions that are going to reject.
But aren't those the ones who were born in the millennium?
Yes.
The ones that are already there.
They would either be, they would have physically survived the tribulation and gone into the millennium, or be born during the millennium. And some of them will fall away. We'll lose them. Not we don't, but John.
Yeah, a little bit of insight in that is what the Lord said about when Noah comes out of the earth, out of the ark rather. You know, you think, no, he's a righteous man, okay?
Yep.
But yet, never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil. Now Noah was a righteous man. Doesn't that show that there's something in man? He's got, you know, anybody who says man does not have an innate sin nature or a fallen nature.
Yep.
You know, no matter how righteous Noah was, and presumably his sons were also, presumably.
At some level, they should have been. We're going to find out that they're not, but.
But yet, he's speaking about mankind, their inclination. That doesn't mean you're completely evil, but your inclination is that way.
Sure.
So the inclination in the millennium, you still have your sin nature, those who
Yep.
have not been regenerated.
Correct. And that's the problem, is that at the end of the day, mankind is not basically good. Now, we like to think that way because that makes us feel better about humanity, you know. But the basic reality is mankind is not good. We are sinful, we are evil, we are all of that. All right, verse 8. Then God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him. Interesting distinction. God has spoken to Noah. We've heard that phrase, and God said to Noah, and God spoke to Noah, and God. Now you have God speaking to Noah and his sons with him. Now, there are a few people that will discuss what about their wives. Why did God leave them out? I'm not sure he did. They could have been right there. In a patriarchal society and in the economy that God has set up, whether you like this or not, I know it's an uncomfortable topic about male headship, but God has called males into that role and into that position. And so in that leadership role, calling them to say that he's speaking directly to them doesn't mean that they weren't there or they did not hear it specifically. Verse 9, now behold.
Can we back up to verse 7? So
Mhm.
is Noah supposed to be fruitful and multiply?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Noah and his boys are supposed to repopulate the earth.
Including Noah, who's like old?
Yes, he's older.
Yeah, okay.
But the command is to Noah and his boys, pardon the crassness, but get busy. You know, it's pretty much what he's saying.
Noah is born pre-flood, so he's got still the extended life here.
Yeah, the virility of humankind is definitely, you know, in our current culture, you know, the child rearing years are fairly short in comparison to what they're doing. You got 100-year-old people having babies here. I mean, that. And the problem is you and I figure a 100-year-old person as somebody who is quote unquote, you know, in a walker. They're doing like this. These 100-year-old people were doing jumping jacks.
You're talking about the women being included in that covenant. Well, they certainly were included in verse 7 as well.
Yep.
So that
Yep.
just gives you the idea they were included.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of can't have,
Along with,
I mean, they haven't figured out cloning yet at this point.
Well, in the past where you said like the genealogy and everything, they don't mention the women, they only mention the men. And I'm sure this was saying that they are only speaking of the men, but it was being said to all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't, when I talk about male headship, that does not devalue women. If anything, it puts a burden onto men that women don't have to bear. It's a different responsibility. It's not a less than situation. It is a equal, created in the image of God, but an economy where God says this is how things are going to work, and I'm going to hold man, humanity's male population, with an extra burden of bearing the responsibility for teaching, caring for, protecting, nurturing, providing all the things that should be, quote unquote, innate to men. Now, behold, I myself do establish my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, of all that comes out of the ark, even every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood. Neither shall there again be a flood to destroy the earth. God said, this is the sign of the covenant which I am making between me and you, and every living creature that is with you, for all successive generations. I set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. It shall come about when when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the cloud, then I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. So this is what we encapsulate as called the Noahic covenant. The covenant with Noah, and it is actually a covenant with Noah and all humanity and all animal kind as well.
Yeah.
There is a key term in this section, the word covenant, it's repeated 7 times. It means to cut, actually. The berit is the Hebrew word, and it means to cut, referring to the cutting of the sacrifices and the things that were involved. Throughout that, it's a drawing a line, it's a specific statement. Through Noah, God makes an agreement with all humankind, and the terms are still in existence today. Covenant language in the Old Testament, we're running into, prima facie issues here, okay? It is bigger than a promise, because promises are also very prolific in the Old Testament. But there are specific times between God and man to man, where covenants were made. A covenant would have been made like if me and Josh have an agreement on something, used to we did this, and it meant something, Now back then, they might take off a sandal in exchange, if they might grab the inner thigh. Just saying, that's what they did. They might, there was an agreement between the two parties, and there was some kind of symbology that went with it. Our wedding rings are a symbol of a covenant agreement. We have some things along the way that make us understand what this is. The basis for this covenant probably goes back to Genesis chapter 8, verses 20 and 22, where there's the clean animal, there's all the sacrifice. But this is more specifically looking at the terms. God will not, number one, will not destroy mankind with floodwaters. That statement becomes very important. It doesn't mean that there's never going to be a flood again. It just means there's not going to be a global flood or a flood that is going to destroy all humankind. People die in floods all the time. That doesn't mean that God broke his covenant by allowing and or causing those events to take place. It would require God to completely destroy the earth again for him to violate the covenant. Second term of the covenant comes in that some people add to this covenant is the fact that mankind can eat animals now. We can all be carnivores. There is the discussion between fear and terror between man and the beasts. That also is there. Human beings are responsible. These are all within what we'd call the Noahic covenant. There are just several points within that. The big part of the Noahic covenant, though, really has to do with destroying the earth by water. And can you think of any other time in Scripture where God made a covenant with an animal?
Does the demon in going into the pigs count as a covenant? Like, if you here's these pigs, if you promise to leave this guy alone and go ahead and do whatever you want.
No, not quite.
You'll never have to swallow a prophet again.
Never have to swallow a prophet. There are none. This is the only covenant that I could find in Scripture, and I did spend a little bit of time because I was like, when I reread this, and again, guys, this is the...
Because I never saw the animal angle at all.
I haven't. I mean, I've gone to college and seminary, and I've studied, and I never caught on through all these years that God made a covenant with the animals. There's a promise to these animals, and it's kind of different that he did.
Yeah, you find this is part of where that ties in, where we see the tribulation in Revelation here, where the trumpets are so forth, the woes coming on, and God's going to do everything to all the other creation that did not get destroyed in the flood. That's going to be the sun, the moon, the stars, the land, the plants, and the fish.
Yep.
But he doesn't have his wrath come down on the animals.
Right.
They're kept out. So they've had their turn already. They'll be spared the next time around.
And Amanda can talk about these things because she goes to Sunday school. Oh, is that a shameless plug for our Sunday school? That's Bob's class right now, right?
It's not shameless.
I'm just plugging. I'm just plugging. So I deep dived. I'm like, why did God make a covenant with the animals? I couldn't. And the answer is I can't tell you why he did. But you can't get around that repeated through this section. He talks about the covenant with humanity and animal kind. So there is a value.
I'm sitting here thinking, our definition of a covenant, to me, it does not seem like it's an agreement.
It's bigger than.
It's a promise. Because it's God, he said, I will establish my covenant. I will establish it. And Noah had it, we call it the Noah covenant, but Noah had nothing to do with it.
In this particular one, no. Noah really didn't have, a lot of time in the covenant situations, there is a if-then or a you do, I do kind of thing that happens in covenant. This one does not have that. The Adamic covenant is also a non-conditional covenant. But yeah, it's hard because in our current economy of language, we only have promise to equate covenant. But it's bigger than that word. It's in a category that is difficult because it elevates a promise to something that is it brings God into the promise, if you will. It's not, and people do this all the time. People do this. I think it's taking the Lord's name in vain when they do this. But people try to do this. They'll say, I swear to what are they trying to do? They're trying to bring God into their promise. And that's usually a sign that they're not telling the truth because, but anyway,
They didn't bring up, the covenant with Abraham was the same thing. I mean, it was all God. Abraham didn't have to do a thing to get that promise there too. But I was going back, just a question here. Do you have any thoughts why it is suddenly that it was going to be allowable to eat meat?
all we have is that God says it's okay. I mean, I don't know what. There are some studies that say that post-flood, what's the word I want? The atmosphere, the nature itself has been so changed that even the nutrients that humanity had pre-flood were not available except through animal kind. So there was a change in our, what was available nutrient-wise.
Could it also be that man's now in the decline, because we hear a lot, your protein is your brain food and stuff like that, and so maybe was it going to be needed?
Yeah, yeah, very much so, Kathy.
So just going off of what you said about, nutrients and stuff, I found that with Julie, the doctors get mad at me for not feeding her meat because a lot of the nutrients your body has to have, like vegetarians are very deficient in a lot of things because they are not getting those specific nutrients that only animals have.
Right, I mean, I don't fault people who want to choose. My daughter-in-law does not eat much meat at all. Not that daughter-in-law. She likes meat. She's okay. Caitlin's okay too. The Caitlin it's not really like she's making a commitment. She just chooses not to eat it because she doesn't like it. But, I don't fault people who choose that, but there is elements we know missing from people's diet when they do choose that. Mara.
My book here calls this covenant an unconditional.
Yes, there is no conditions here. There are conditions on different other covenants, but this one is a unconditional one. Sean, or I can't know who's first.
What, in your opinion, is the meaning of the word everlasting in this context? Whenever I see what I call a forever word, I always pay attention to.
I think probably we should take it at face value. And the reason I think that is because even in the new heavens and the new earth, I think it carries in. I think it carries in that there's not going to be this kind of destruction ever. It's interesting to me that the rainbow shows up in descriptions of heaven. Later, we get the rainbow around the throne description in Revelation.
We won't be eating meat.
Who's that?
Nah, I'm
They talk about
pretty sure it
choice
says it.
marrow, what the wedding supper, I think,
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah, choice marrow is part of the marriage supper.
And
What?
Marrow, bone marrow.
it's
That's meat.
It's in, yes.
I thought in the millennium, though, there's no, I'm almost positive there's.
I'd have to go deep with you. I'm not sure off the top of my head, to be honest. You're thinking about the killing aspect, probably, and I'm going to say I don't know. That's what I'm going to do because I'm not going to thus say it. But we do, at least at the marriage supper of the Lamb, we have this description of choice marrow, which would be bone marrow. You gotta kill the animal to get to the bones. And bone marrow is really good, by the way. Ken.
That wasn't only Abraham, Noah and his family, really, animals started eating each other.
Yes.
Before the flood, they were all.
Yeah, despite Jurassic Park and all the other worlds that tell us how the dinosaurs live, studies have shown, and there is good scientific information that tells us that most of them were, I would say all of them were herbivores prior to the flood. Matt, did I see your hand again?
So, yeah, that was my
You're
only
talking about
question.
eating meat in heaven, animals are in heaven.
There are some animals in heaven, yes.
Dogs.
I don't know if Fido and Fifi are going to get there, but which one, Fido or Fifi? All dogs go to heaven, all cats go. Never mind.
So there was there weren't carnivore
Well, there was definitely killing going on prior to the flood amongst humanity.
Yeah.
After the fall, I'm going to go with, I don't know.
Okay, and-
Now, it would drive, I would have to deep dive before I give a good answer on that.
You know, was a rainbow possible before?
We're going to talk about that in a second. Hold that thought.
Okay.
We are going to talk about that. Actually, we're getting close to it. God does set apart the rainbow as a token of the pledge. And I got in my notes to ask the question, was there, we're actually right there, Tim. I didn't realize that we're up to
There
it.
couldn't have been, there was never rain before.
But there was a mist.
So let's discuss, was there a rainbow before this? What do you think? Matt?
Yes.
Matt says yes.
I said no.
No.
Well, you can have a rainbow because like, I mean, that's how light has always worked, assumedly, unless he changed how light works after the flood. But he attached the meaning of I'm never gonna flood the earth again to the rainbow back then.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that you see smaller rainbows, if you have a waterfall, something like that, it catches, you would see something like it. Whether or not you get the big bow, maybe take something bigger than that.
Okay, maybe there were many rainbows prior to this, but a skyward, maybe the mist and stuff, you could see a color prismatic effect, but a bow, and this is important because the bow, we'll talk about what that word means.
But you need clouds and sunlight,
Yeah,
so,
you have clouds and sunlight.
did we have clouds and sunlight?
Yeah.
Okay.
But wasn't the canopy that covered completely?
Yes.
So that light that you would have needed for that rainbow would have been filtered through the canopy.
If the canopy was indeed a mist-filled canopy, which is what most people believe, there's rainbow possibility right there. All it takes is water and light to have a rainbow. That's all it takes. There are people on both sides of the aisle in this discussion, I'm going to tell you right now. There are people that believe, nope, there was not one rainbow prior to this. Doesn't matter how the water hit the lights of God. God protected all of the water from creating rainbows until now. There are people that believe that. Then there is the other camp there's actually a third camp, but the second camp would be kind of what Amanda's talking about, the mini rainbows. There would have been waterfalls, mist falls, there would have been rainbows. And the third camp would be more that there have been rainbows, but God now is taking something that is known and adding a specific significance to it, adding a theological emphasis to something that is practical. That is theologically consistent to do that. We drink these little tiny vials of this and bread, right? We're remembering the covenant, the new covenant during that time. So it is a piece of bread that has been elevated, if you will, to have theological significance. It is juice, wine, whatever the people have in their little cup. It is the fruit of the vine that has been elevated to have a theological significance. It is an interesting description using the word bow. One commentator said that it was God hanging up his bow in the clouds and stepping away from wrath. It's a picture of the bow and arrow, and God hangs his bow up that he's not going to destroy earth this way ever again. It's interesting. I don't think there's nothing in the word that's theologically significant, but I do think that it's interesting to think about that God is setting aside his wrath. When we look at this, it is so interesting to me, not surprising, and I say this with as much grace as I can, it shouldn't surprise you that the world wants to take what God has set apart and use it for other things. The rainbow, if you will, currently, culturally, has been stolen from its theological significance. It's not the first time it's happened. The leprechauns stole it probably first, They stole the significance of the covenant, that Irish mindset But our current culture has stolen it. They chose the rainbow based on the multicolors having and they use every color for them it's one of the LGBTQIA plus signatures are on each one of those colors.
When the color's out.
Yeah, they do. They often do. They keep messing around with it, so I can't keep up with it. But we kind of know, everybody remember Roy G. Biv, right? Or Roy G. Biv, as it became later, because purple and violet evidently are different. Everybody's looking at me like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo and violet, indigo and purple.
And indigo's kind of a phony color anyway, but that's it.
It's a phony color. It's a bluish color.
It's like.
It's a purplish bluish.
Is it in a Crayola box?
Oh, good grief. The answer to that question is, which box do you have?
It's in the box.
Because if you have the 64, I have a thinking there might be an indigo in there. I don't know. It's not the 8 count, Tim.
I have the 8 box.
Hey, and then you got this. He talks about a cloud. He talks about how the rainbows are made in this text. One of the things that I find that's interesting in this section is God doesn't need to be reminded, if you will, of anything. I think that's a theological premise. I think we could agree on that. Yet the text says, repeatedly, when I see it, I will remember. Now there's that idea that why do you think God put it that way? Why do you think it says that God, when he sees the rainbow, he'll remember what he's promising?
Because God's forgetful? No.
That doesn't work.
Well, because there were times when he took back his blessing because of people, like with the Jews, because how they would go away from him, then they'd come back, and then forgive them, go away from him, come back and forgive them. So when he looks at that, then it will let him know he won't do.
Okay, Ken?
Do you think that it's to bring us into the picture so we can relate to what God is telling us? It's
Okay.
not that he has to remember, but it's good for us to know that he does remember.
It's good for us. That's a good way to say it.
One, at the time we could be looking at it, is for us to remember that God's looking at it too, but I also have to say, there's how many rainbows are there going on around the world at any given time, so there may be, it's a constant thing God is always remembering.
Very much so. Any other thoughts on why it's in there, Timothy?
When I think of Job and the Psalms, often the remark is, have you forgotten? Will you forget? And maybe it's a sign that, a promise to us that he does not forget, an assurance.
Yeah. I think, combining that with what Ken said, it is a way for us to relate to God. It's not a literal anthropomorphism, but it's awfully close. The fact that we know, for example, when God forgives, he forgets. So he removes it as far as the east is from the west. He puts it behind his back into the depths of the sea to be remembered no more. How does he do that? Well, it's an intentionality. It's part of his character.
Right,
it's
right.
an intentional thing.
It's not like he's not omniscient anymore.
Correct.
Yeah, he's choosing to not remember it, although he does know it, he's not gonna forget.
Yeah. and then I think it fits the same idea here with the rainbow. It's not that God could ever forget, but it is also a reminder to us that God does not forget. John?
It's also maybe a subtle way of telling us that God has personality. He has feelings. You know,
Absolutely.
He was, there was times when he was grieved that he had made man. Really, did he grieve and not know? And that's obviously not. He knew.
Right?
But he has thoughts. He has emotions. I think it's a subtle way of presenting God to us, especially when it's this early in Scripture, when it describes God that way.
I think so. I think it's a part of drawing in. Elsewhere in Scripture, the rainbow is used, as I mentioned, around the throne of God. It's also talked about in Ezekiel as the radiance of God's presence is described. But I think that Ezekiel imagery matches up with John's imagery later. It's interesting that the word bow gets used. It shows up a lot in Near Eastern mythology. The Mesopotamian creation epic, Marduk suspended in the sky and set a constellation, the victorious bow that he had defeated. Another, Tiamat was the other deity. Babylonian astronomy, a group of stars in the shape of bows, was a reminder of the accoutrements of the war goddess. The Ugaritic myth deals with the relationships of the goddess Enath, and it talks about the bow. The Bible itself, numerous poetic texts figure to refer to God's bows and arrows, and there are parts of this. So it's interesting, I say all that to just say it's interesting how this word bow has been, again, taken by other cultures, other belief systems, and perverted into something that fits their deity system, but it's God's idea. This is a major oath. This is a major, all covenants are major, but this is a pretty big one, y'all. This is a pretty big covenant here.
Usually when the Lord makes a promise, like he'll say, if you do this, I will do this.
Yeah, this is
If you don't,
non-conditional.
Yeah.
No conditions. Even the new covenant has a condition to it. The salvation covenant, you have to come into relationship. You can't just, I'm part of that covenant. Well, no, you're not until you get in. There are things that you have to do to get into it. So before we read the next section, which we are definitely doing part 1 and part 2, just for the record, because it's going to be a little bit to get through this next section. But let's step back a little bit and get ourselves in perspective. You have Adam and Eve created perfect in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve are in a walk and talk relationship with God. There is a physical communication of some level between God and mankind. Sin enters, and then God, destroys, if you will, or Adam and Eve destroy that relationship. They destroy the original covenant, and sin enters into the world. And part of that, Adam now has to, he has to work. He's going to suffer. Eve is going to have pain in childbearing. There's going to be problems, interrelational problems because of sin. That's where the original struggle happened. People got along just fine until Adam and Eve messed it up. Of course, there wasn't a lot of people, just 2 of them. But you've got this situation. Children come into the world. You have Cain, Abel come along the way. We have murder that enters in. You have Seth come along, so the Sethites are coming along. We've got God, even through all this, preserving the godly line. The climate of the world is in such a way that it has been some level of perfection. The trees, the plants, and all of this stuff, with the exceptions of thorns and thistles and things that came as a result of the fall. fall affected everything, affected humanity and affected the earth as well. We're moving real quickly here. Down through time, you have cultural civilizations, you have population explosion, you have all of this going on, and God has, if you will, said, come on, get your act together. If you don't, I'm going to have to do something. Let me work with this righteous group. And basically, Mama's had enough. Well, God had enough and said, no, this is what's going to happen. And even in his I've had enough statement, there was a redemption plan in place. The ark was the redemption plan in place. The only reason that I can see, because it never says anything contrary to this, the only reason there were only 8 people on the ark is because everybody else refused it. I see nothing in Scripture that tells me that they could not have gotten on the ark. They did not get on the ark.
I was going to point out, I know we've had talked whether or not Noah had some other sons, and I think first that they were lost. But the one thing you have, we do know, Noah had brothers and sisters.
Sure.
Not a single one of them made it on the ark.
Correct. It's very interesting what gets left behind at the ark. When you begin to think about how many people were on the earth, the age of people, how long, Methuselah, he's right up to the end. 900, you got 900 plus years old. And you get to the ark, flood covers the earth. Complete global flood. We, speaking for all of us, don't believe in any kind of localized floods that destroyed just the Middle East, if you will. There's the argument that when they just destroyed humanity in that area. Well, again, if we hold to a universal continent, a unified continent, if you will, at that point, different. But flood covers everything. Above the tallest mountain, which was smaller. We've covered the time span. We are now getting off the ark by God's commandment. God has set up some structures along the way. Noah is still worshiping God at this point. He's built an altar. God is in a garden-like relationship with Noah and the kids at this point. There is something in that direct communication between God, Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. There's a direct communication line that they have. And God makes this covenant. And then we get into verse 18. Now, the sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. We'll have to talk about that. These 3 were the sons of Noah. And from these, the whole earth was populated. Then Noah began farming and planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine and became drunk and uncovered himself inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his 2 brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon their shoulders and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were turned away, so that they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him. So he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brothers." He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." And then we have the, if you will, tagline, Noah lived 350 years after the flood, so all the days of Noah were 950 years, and then he died. Wow! This kind of starts a new chapter. That's all we're going to say on that matter. It feels like there should be like a chapter 9a or something at this point, because it's like, we're going chapter 1, chapter 2, and you get chapter 9. It's like, and we got all this beautiful stuff. We got the covenant, we got this relationship. Bam! We've got problems in the land. You know, it feels like we need something else. So it is, the flood narrative is over. We're moving into a new narrative, a new discussion. Whereas up till now, there are various Mesopotamian mythologies, narrative, counterpart traditions to everything we've talked about so far. There's other, quote unquote, other flood type stories, other creation stories, but there is not a counterpart to this section. This is it's on its own thing. We see that during this time the vine is cultivated. It's interesting that when you look at the heroes of the Mesopotamian epics, they are completely removed from the world of men, and they are not associated with agriculture, not associated with any kind of humanity kind. Noah being this kind of hero figure. And then mentioning Japheth and Canaan takes us out of the Mesopotamian world and pulls us into kind of an Eastern Mediterranean ambience. We're shifting language here poetically. The narrative is separated by a time lapse, and the time lapse here is however long it takes to grow grapes, and to the point where they can be harvested, and harvested enough to. And I was going to look, and I just forgot and didn't have time. I don't know. Does anybody know how long it takes to grow a vineyard? I'm assuming a decent vineyard.
Like 3 years, you can start producing grapes.
Is that enough to be able to say you have wine at that point after 3 years?
Well, it's hard to say what it would have been at that time.
Yeah.
Now you would have 3 or 4 years.
Okay, so 3 to 4 years anyway. The point that I would say here is just that I think that is important to catch is it really didn't take that long. At the end of the day, it really didn't take that long for mankind to get back into trouble that they just got out of.
He was a righteous man, but he drank too much.
Well, we're going to talk about the sin of Noah with this whole discussion too. There's also, by mentioning Noah's grandson in this context, also emphasizes there's been a time lapse, but that could have been 9 months. Yeah.
It doesn't mention Noah having other children.
It at this point it does not. No, we have no further record of Noah having other children. Presumably he did, but this 3-person line. But I think the presuming that he did is still, it's kind of out there because we only have these 3, but they're often in genealogies, others not mentioned and names not mentioned. So I'm not going to go dogmatic on either way. I'm comfortable with him having just these 3 and that's it. But is it possible? Sure. It is agriculture. There's another word for it. I can't think of what. There's a word for doing grapes, and I can't remember what it's called. It's interesting that the historic, if you study wine and its historical nature, it all goes back to kind of an Armenia, Turkey. It goes back to that area. They've done, the DNA of grapes, if you will, and it goes back to this area where the ark would have landed. So again, we're going back, even in, DNA studies, they drive us back to this area, to this one place that all this began. Man.
I was going to say just that mentioned that Noah's a man of soil, so we would assume prior to building the ark, he probably was a farmer in a sense, that he probably had his own vineyards back then too, because he knew what he was doing.
Sure.
I was going to point out that you're going to say, oh my goodness, he drank, but then that's something that was just culture at the time. It's how you preserve your grapes. They didn't do grape juice back then. Uh, What else did you do with the grapes? You had to be able to put it away that you could store it for later. And it's not a lot different than the Egyptians, where everybody in the kids drank beer. In fact, it was almost better for you because you didn't want to drink the water back then, because now it's gone through the process here. It's safer to drink than just water out of the Nile.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, Jack.
I don't know, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking some time had to really elapse here, because you got 8 people, and we're talking about 3 men and 3 women that are starting to have children, and you're still 9 months. So when you start doing that math, it's gonna take a long time before this family starts to develop. And by that time, he needs to be working the farm like Amanda says. He has to begin producing food for his family as his families grow. So, you know, I mean, I understand where Sean is coming from, 3 to 4 weeks, 3 to 4 years for grapes, because, you know, even fruit trees take 6 or 7 years before they start producing
Sure.
any type of fruit. So I think a lot more than 3 or 4 years has elapsed here.
Plus he brought some on the ark.
Brought some what?
Wine.
Well, I'm presuming he did have wine on the ark. I mean, there would have been other things that, how much was left after all that time, I don't know. But, you know, the agricultural mindset, you know, it's kind of innate. You know, there is something about growing things. I know some of y'all have brown thumbs, and, you know, when it comes to certain things, I got a dead plant in my office right now, I think. That's probably because of neglect. But it's hiding in the bathroom, you can't see it. But there's something about humanity to till, and even God tells Adam that that's what he's going to do. So it has been passed down to be an agricultural, to have an agricultural basis for everything going on. Bob?
I'm thinking the Lord may have provided plants that grew right away, that gave them enough to eat until they could cultivate.
I think there were plants on the ark. I mean, there are people that don't like to talk about that, but I think that there may have been like a section where, you know, oh, here we're going to keep the petunias, and we're going to keep a corn plant over here, so when all this is over, we can plant it outside.
But even roots that would still be in the ground that would have started to grow right.
Yeah, there would have been some seed type things that could have been preserved in the earth that would have grown in weird places. You know, there's interesting studies about why do some, for example, why do some Middle Eastern type plants just show up in North America? Why does that happen? Well, flood explains it.
I was going to say, I mean, we got in Jonah there, how the plant that he had, he grew it up in a day and so forth. He could have had when they got off the ark, but
Yeah, there could have been.
Speeded up the growth process.
There could have been some kind of divine growth acceleration of some sort. But as Jack has pointed out, you know, you do have, unless they had quintuplets, you know, over and over and over again, you know, you do have some time. As far as, all I can say is it's enough time for Noah to have grandkids and there to be a vineyard enough to have harvested wine at this point. How long that is, I don't have a long span of time. I don't believe it was 100 years. You know, I think that's, we're pushing it if we try to do that. But it's probably more than 2 or 3. But again, you know, linear chronology, this is not long. You know, we're bipping in here with a very short amount of time.
Well, the dove came back, with an olive,
Branch, yeah.
so that means something grew.
Yeah.
So other things could have grown on.
Sure. Sure, man.
But the thing we don't know is whether or not Noah's been drunk before this, after the flood. We just got this incident that shows something's gone wrong.
Yeah. And I think on that note, we'll stop. Because we have to talk about the sin of Noah, and drunkenness, and is this a
It's it-
first
Rory-
incident?
Rory cuts Noah a break. I don't know
He
if
does.
you read that.
Yep, he does. There are a few people that cut Noah a break. We're going to talk about that.
Who?
There's a few people that cut Noah a break, commentary-wise.
And,
But it's going to be interesting, so go back and kind of read this section, because, you know, understanding what's going to happen here, we have the Canaanites now, not the Canaanites. We'll have that, and we have a first drunkenness, we have the first something. We're going to talk about what was going on between Ham and Noah and the nakedness. What was it? What does it really mean? What happened? What didn't happen?
because it said he did something.
We're going to talk about that.
Yep.
And then we're also going to have to talk about, because we have the first time servants or slavery is instituted. So you got some real firsts that are jumping out here. So read this section over a couple times, and we'll get back into it next week. Can you believe June is here already, guys? June's here. Yeah.
Isn't that the first time that the word covenant
Uh-huh.
has come up?
Yes.
Because you did-
We say that there was an Adamic covenant because of the nature of it, but there's not, that word is not used until here. All right, let's pray. God, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for what we can learn and have learned, and how we continue to see the affirmation of the truth that you have laid out. The rainbow promise still exists, and we are receiving the blessings of that. And we're grateful for that. We see how you reinstituted humanity and all of the different agriculture of things, farming and animal culture and everything that happened. Humanity and fallenness want to try to add millions and billions of years. They want to try to explain stuff away. But the further we look, the deeper we look, the more DNA studies that happen, they point back to this central area of the world where something significant happened. We who are believers in the truth of God's word and stand firm on it have no problem, because we understand that that's exactly what you said happened. It was the center place of humanity, the birthplace of all humankind that would dwell upon the earth. And God, it's hard for us to wrap around why something as tragic, I guess is a word, would happen so quickly after you have just saved their lives, and having witnessed your wrath for what sin does. And yet choices are made, decisions are made, and there is a breakdown in the family, there's a breakdown in the culture, and once again, we see that sin has consequences, and sin hurts. It hurts the heart of God, it hurts relationships, and God, help us to be sensitive, and may we quickly confess whatever you point out in our individual lives. May we understand that it is an intentionality. Even as Timothy talked about this morning, it's an intentionality that we must put into our relationship with you. We can't just coast on, well, I'm saved, I'm on my way there. There's got to be an intentionality in our lives and what we do and how we teach our kids and our grandkids. We must be engaged, and realizing that sometimes, even when that's going on, there are choices that get made that are simple choices that hurt. And I'm grateful that you have a plan of redemption for when those things happen, but we also can see your justice in how things happen as well. And it feels weird to the world, but we can celebrate a God who is both just and merciful. And we thank you for that. We just ask, God, that you would use us this week as we go out into this world that you put us into. Should you tarry your return, help us to find somebody to talk to about Jesus this week. Whether it's giving them a tract, having a conversation, asking if we can pray for them. God, help us to engage well. Help us to live the so what question that we've been talking about. And God, I pray that you would just bless the efforts of your people as we continue to move forth in what you've called us to. Give us journey mercies as we travel from this place. And God, help us to remember to thank you when we get home safely. And help us to cultivate even that attitude of gratitude. And God, may you be pleased. And should you tarry your return, draw us back together as we will celebrate together, love on each other, and fulfill the call that you have placed on us in this world. We pray in Christ's name. Amen.